Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. This is going to be one for the ages. I've been waiting to have this episode for a long time because I wanted to do it in person, but that's not happening anytime soon. We have with us my very dear friend, Chris Williamson, internet thirst trap and host of the Modern Wisdom podcast, Love Island hunk, and all sorts of other things to your resume. One of the things that you do great, so there's a list of like 10 people that I know who, if I ask them for advice, I'm comfortable outsourcing my decision-making opinions to them, and you're one of them when it comes to the podcasting space because you know this world so well. And I am really, one of the things people talk a lot about is how you get successful, get yourself to a certain level, because that's very, very hard to do. What there's much less of is what do you do when you get there? And I know that's something that you guys talk about, you know, you've experienced your life in your show. I'm at that point and it is, I'm kind of drowning, and I wanted to get your advice because what people don't realize is when things grow exponentially, it's like if you're selling like 1,000 shirts and then next month you're selling 2,000, when you go up to 20,000 shirts, you don't have that bandwidth. And it's a really tough place to be. And people are like, oh, boohoo, you have too many orders. Well, it is boohoo. What am I supposed to do? So writing books, doing this show, Twitter, I am kind of at the end of my rope. And I'm very curious because you also, you know, cover a lot of bases. What have you done in your life to try to manage kind of workflow?
It's a good question. I think we have an abundance of choices now, right? We have more things that we can do than time to do them in.
Yeah,
everyone does. Even the mum. You know, somebody's mum who's got to look after the kids might also decide to start a book club, and then I'm going to do the garden, and scroll that all the way up to the digital nomad, media personality, internet entrepreneur. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do. Being honest, the biggest solution I've found for it is to do less but better. So I am quite a curious individual. I have a high desire for novelty. I love doing new things. And that can lead me to saying yes to a lot of stuff, different projects, trip away, traveling, whatever it might be. And I ended up being fairly mediocre at quite a lot of stuff. And I had to learn to let go of some of it. Your current media-verse setup to me seems a bit more cohesive. Mine was very disparate and I was picking things from different areas. But everyone that's listening knows that there are certain things they do in their life that are not contributing to their higher order goals, but also aren't contributing to their rest. It's not the same to take a little bit of time off and go for a walk or go and party or do whatever versus doing something which is just like you used to do it and now you still do because you've never questioned it. You still decide to, whatever it might be, run that business with a business partner you hate that makes no money when you've got a new passion project that you care about. What is it that you're finding challenging? Like, is it moving from speaking to writing to the quick Twitter stuff?
I'll tell you exactly. And like people are like, get an assistant. There's nothing I can outsource. So here are the things that are taking up all my time. Twitter, which is a big source of my platform and what people like my work. Writing this book. The gyms close at 10, so I wake up at 11 and go to bed at 2. I can't really do work after the gym because I'm wiped, and it's kind of tough. So then the live streams I do, this show, I have my locals where I try to spend as much time as possible, and that doesn't even leave any time for socializing or anything. Well, not that I can because everyone moved away. I don't see how any of and here's the other thing. It's at the point my friend had to sit me down yesterday, my friend Steph, who I've known since high school, because when people send contributions, I want to, like, they ask me a question or something like that. I like to kind of be like, whatever. She's like, you have to get used to the idea that people aren't always expecting a response. But to me, it's kind of unethical. And this is, you know, they didn't have them in Britain. They have them here, these televangelists, right? And what they would do is people would send them checks and they would be like, please pray for this person. And they would just cash the check and the letter would go in the garbage. And that is as low to me of a human being as you can get, where you like just take someone's cash and you're like, yeah, that's cool. I think that's just beyond despicable. But at the same time, is my Twitter feed just going to be like, I don't know what to do. And this,
well, what happens? Here's a good question for you. What happens if you 10x your platform in the next 5 years?
I don't know. And that's
precisely. So the problem that you have is one of scale. There's much worse problems to have than the one that you're coming up against. But as the platform grows and these diseconomies of scale come in, the amount of communication you need to do, the amount of podcast invites that you'll get, everything, you need to let some of those things go. This is something I'm only just getting used to as well. The whole media podcast world is still fairly fresh to me too. But letting go of good opportunities to focus on great opportunities is the best piece of advice that I could give.
Yeah, that's already happened. So like I barely do any shows.
In that case, I think that your parameters for good need to continue to rise up. If you're going at 100 miles an hour just to be able to keep up,
right,
then you're whatever the waterline is that you think good is at, actually maybe that's not so good, and maybe you need to keep on raising it up.
You know, I just ended my second show, Nightshade, a couple months ago, something which I would have thought unthinkable a year prior. And it's just like what you said. It's like, okay, I thought this is a huge chunk of my time, my day, and this will give me some breathing space. And again, this sounds like a humble brag, and it's not. My YouTube went up by 50% in 2 months. So when these things start hitting, they do not move linearly, they move exponentially. And there's no way you can increase what you're doing exponentially, even if you have assistance.
That's one of the big takeaways that I had as well. The Essentialism by Greg McKeown was sort of the big realization book that made me work this out. But the power laws at the very, very end, the amount of leverage that you get by being close to the top within any particular domain makes so much more of a difference than just being mediocre across multiple ones. Unless they feed in, unless your UVP is that you can be an author who has a podcast, who does YouTube, who blah, 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 blah. Like, if they're disparate, and that's what I said at the start, if they're different things, you just need to pick, okay, what's the one thing? In the UK at the moment, we have a lockdown.
Yeah.
A lot of people, the gyms are closed, restaurants are closed, everything's shut. Nothing is open, right? Hairdressers are closed.
Everything got shot?
That is the lowest. It's my language. It's my language. You're not even American. This is my language.
True.
Anyway, yeah. Right? Okay. Bastard. So, everything's closed at the moment.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are struggling. We're going to be in lockdown for perhaps the next 6 weeks to 8 to 10 weeks with no gym, and it's cold. It's minus 1 degree Celsius outside, right? So it's freezing. The question that I had everyone ask was, what would I have to do during lockdown in order for me to look back on lockdown and consider it a success?
That's okay. That's a great question.
Yeah, because for the most part, people want something. They want to feel like they're doing something, but they don't know what that thing is. And that's a question as well. Okay, I have these 20 different goals I want to achieve in 2021. You know, we're beginning of the new year, people set New Year's resolutions. Okay, how about you rank order them and cross off the bottom 19? If you just do that top one, you will feel so much more fulfilled, and you'll be closer to your goals, and it'll be the one that makes 90% of the difference in any case. So, yeah, don't spread yourself too thin.
But I don't know what that means in this context, because I'm not trying to be difficult, but what I'm saying is, and yeah, part of this is ego talking. Of those things I laid out, I don't know how any of them can be.
But once you've written the book, you're going to stop writing the book.
Well, I have a cartoon dropping this month even. So that's a whole other thing that's on the plate.
There was a point at which you said yes to the cartoon, though.
Right, but the cartoon's done. Right.
Okay.
So it's coming out. Me and very failed podcaster Tom Woods. It's going to be doled out over the year. But that's little because it's just going to take time to promote. But the point is, this is something that's just going to add to the input problem, because that's going to be a whole other
audience. You've got two choices. You can either put up with the level of workload that you've got or reduce it. That's it.
That is it, right? I guess you can't help me because I don't know where I can cut anymore.
You don't want to lose any of the things that you're doing, as a lot of people who are listening might feel the same. I have these things, I enjoy doing these things, they make me feel fulfilled, or they give me financial security, or whatever it is. But that means that if you're not going to go it and you're adamant you can't delegate it, you've just got to continue to eat those frogs until there is a time where you see a route out, or you're able to step back, or the project's completed.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I don't look at my Twitter mentions or something.
I wish I had the magic formula for you, but
it's validating to appreciate that I had, analyzed. There was a course I took. I was a business major, and it was called Business Practices, I think it was called, I forgot what it was. I was a holy terror to that poor teacher. It was. I felt bad for her in retrospect, but she was weak, so she deserved it. But the whole point was, there was this book, Nancy White, if she's still alive. That poor woman. If you try to assert authority over Russian, it's really like Saw. It's bad. And we're trained this as youth. Like my grandma would encourage high school suicide because she's like, let's weed the herd. Like, this is the mentality. Do you think we're ever going to? So my friend Rob Mons, he's a filmmaker. He had sat me down once, and he had said, and this is kind of tying into our trip to the motherland in July. He had said that he's like, you guys are like Martians, Russians are to the West. Like, you look like us, but you're completely wired differently. And until he said that, I didn't realize to what extent the Russian programming is completely foreign to Western programming. And a lot of it is also built on passing. Because in Russian culture, you have to pass as normal in a culture, a society that's built on finding people to destroy with purges. Under communism, everyone's watching you, so you're trained very, very well to be able to pass and swim as normal. You have to, or else.
So you've got these sort of two personalities, like the public facing and perhaps the inner thoughts as well.
Yeah, Fuck. And you have to have that. Because you have to, until let's say 8 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, whenever I said something to anyone, I would run a scan where, if this person turns on you, would this be able to be used against you?
Is this information libelous? Yeah.
And that is, I think, the default for many Russian people, and it's something that people in the West cannot wrap their heads around. I'll tell you another story. And this is also something I do have some contempt for Americans for, and I think you'll agree with this one. There was some guy, he had this, it's very white people stuff, where he would get a lot of people who were talented or accomplished, whatever. They'd get together, 30, he did this once a month, and people would ask each other for advice on their problems. And the person had an issue with someone at work, and one after another, the advice was just sit him down and talk to him. And to me, I wanted to shoot those people in the face, because if it's a cliche, it's not advice. There's no possibility the person hasn't considered sit them down and talk to him. So don't open your mouth unless you have something to say, or if you are going to say the generic thing, say it in a non-generic way and back it up. And there was none of that. My advice, the Russian advice, and I got people really upset at me, was start turning everyone in the office against them and make them a scapegoat. Because you should always do that in any corporation, because that way it's your insurance policy. And people were very offended by this. Thankfully,
so you can raise yourself up by bringing them down. No,
it's that if something goes wrong, which it inevitably will, have it be the person you hate will be emotionally who people ascribe the blame to. And also, it's very easy people get together much better against a common enemy than against common goals. So whenever you're in an office, you're going to find someone who's horrible, and that horrible person is probably going to, just be passive aggressive and insufferable. But this is also when I was working corporate America. I don't have to deal with this anymore, because I don't have to be powerless and hiding behind all sorts of facades. So, but that's the kind of advice where at least the person's gonna, if they think it's horrible, which I can see why they would, at least think it's something original to think about instead of just sit them down and talk. What would you tell them to do if you had a problem with a coworker?
Man, I've had multiple issues. My nightclub business is very backstabby, very intermingly.
Yeah.
The way that we would go about it would be call the other person out publicly on the social media of choice and make them look as silly as possible, because you gaining status hierarchy is them losing it. And for as long as you look like the person that can earn the most money, has the most successful nights, that's a way to go about it. Now I feel like I'm a little bit more sort of mature and chilled about it, but that was my entire industry for a decade, man. It was just find the person that's competing with us and continue to put them down with a disinformation campaign to a very tight-knit group of people. There's only about 1 million people that live in Newcastle, and of those that are within our target market, maybe a couple 100,000, maybe 50,000. It's pretty easy to get all of those people to believe a thing, and yeah, we were pretty effective at that.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. I want to take a second and thank our newest sponsor, FUM. It's a great natural and non-addictive replacement for smoking, vaping, and nicotine. This is a hollow piece of Canadian maple with cores infused with the benefits of the world's super plants. And black pepper cores are a great natural nicotine craving reducer. If you use the code MALICE10, you get 10% off your entire order at FUM Essential, FUMessential.com. Here's the thing. A friend of mine used to work at an organization, American Council on Science and Health. Quitting smoking is very, very hard. It's most efficacious when you have this half step where you transition to a safer habit, and then you could quit that habit. So this is something that I know a bit about in terms of quitting that horrible, horrible habit. So there's black pepper cores for quitting, peppermint cores for better breathing, lavender for relaxation, and they're manufactured and sustainably produced in Canada with Canadian maple. Don't hold that against them. If you go to FUMessential.com and use promo code MALICE, you get 10% off your entire order. Let's get back to the show. Well, so let's talk a little about Newcastle, because so one of the things we only know about different cities based on what we see on telly, I think you guys call it. And there's some Americans might know of. There's a really, I think this show could be a reason why it's justified to nuke Great Britain. There's a show called Geordie Shore, right? Which was a ripoff of Jersey Shore. And it's all the people in Newcastle, and they're just completely mentally limited trash, just all getting drunk and sleeping with each other. And the girls are horrible and the guys are horrible. And is Newcastle like a trashy city? Okay, so it's not representative. And I don't want you to trash your own town, but I mean,
it's not where I'm from. I'm from somewhere, Stockton, which is 40 miles south of here, and the claim to fame of Teesside, where that is, was that they had the highest teen pregnancy rating in the UK until a couple of years ago, when they lost it, so they don't even have that anymore. Newcastle, the nightlife certainly is that. So season 1, episode 1 of Geordie Shore, they're in my event. I'm stood on the front door. So that sort of scene is what I've monetized for an entire career, which now is starting to fade a little bit, but there was a period for a long time. I'm going to guess that Jersey Shore must have had the same thing. They must have just filled that cliche. There must have been tons of people that wanted to be Paulie D and the other ones whose names I can't. It's 20 years old now.
The Situation, yeah.
Yeah, The Situation. There must have been people who tried to emulate that, and then the promoters will take advantage of that, because if they appeal to that market, they will continue to funnel people in.
I grew up in a Italian neighborhood, Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. So that Jersey Shore stuff was how I grew up. And I think they came off a lot better than the Geordie Shore people, because they did still have a lot of values. Like, maybe they're not high class in terms of education, but they did have a certain sense of morality. They're very there for each other. It wasn't just about getting laid. Whereas that, it just seemed so. That's the thing I think Americans don't appreciate. I say this all the time. The British accent is this great social cover, because Americans think all British people are smarter than them. And I'm like, they're not. There's plenty of stupid people on both sides of the pond. And
the lewdness of the behavior
Yeah.
that you see on Geordie Shore versus Jersey Shore is insane. Like, there's girls pissing the bed, like having a shit in the middle of a nightclub. The girls do this. They'll just pull their pants to one side and do it. And when Americans see this, they're like, they can't believe that this is on TV, on MTV. So yeah, you're right. It's a very sort of louty drinking culture. I've contributed to that. Like, there's only 5 companies here, and we're one of the biggest, so it's part of our industry. But thankfully, that's passed a little bit now. It's a little bit cooler in Newcastle.
Let's talk about traveling in Europe. So one of the things you and I have been talking a lot about is, for the first time in my life since I left at age 1.5, we were going to go back to Russia, the motherland where I was born, the Soviet Union technically, for my birthday in July. How bad are the lockdowns in Europe right now? And do you think we're actually going to be able to do this?
By July, I think
it's 6 months away from today. Exactly.
By July, I think we should be much better.
Okay.
I don't know about travel, and it depends on specifically where you're wanting to go.
Okay.
But I can fly out of the UK whenever I want. I just need to write a certificate saying that I'm going somewhere for work, which I would be to go with you. So I'm not going to get stopped here. It's just a case of whether we get stopped there. I don't know what the areas you're planning.
Wait, so how's this lockdown working for you? You can't leave your house, but you can go to the airport?
So you can leave the house for particular reasons. You can't go to the gym. You can't meet more than one other person from one other household, even outside. You can't go to another person's house. But if I say I'm going to go and film a multi-part vlog series with my friend Michael Malice in Russia, there's a letter, there's a PCR test, I can just get on a flight.
Oh, but this seems to completely counter, because you're bringing it back or you're bringing it there.
Well, they're also allowing people to fly into the UK without negative COVID tests, and then there's no isolation upon arrival. So, it's just the British government has got it so wrong.
Oh my God.
So wrong. And obviously you can imagine, because some British people, we still have quite we're quite law-abiding citizens, you know. We're still prim. Even the Geordie Shore ones are still kind of prim and proper.
Yeah.
In that kind of respect, you know, Boris comes on TV and he waggles his finger and he says, yes, we'll do it for the country. It's like the Blitz. But then you see stuff like this and you just think, like, hang on, so you're telling the people are locked down within their house, and yet you fly in from France or Germany or Russia or whatever, no PCR test, no COVID certificate, go where you want.
Oh my God. So one of the other things that I think you do very well on your show is you punch above your weight in terms of getting major name guests. So I know you put thought into how you do this. What advice would you give people for how to contact and reach out to people maybe they don't think they have a shot with? And I'll give you my counter to this. If someone gets my email and I've never given them my email address, I will not reply to them out of principle. I usually won't even read it. Because it's kind of like, I find that to be a bit of a violation.
Yeah, I think that's a particular quirk of you, though. I think more people than you might think are quite flattered by just someone reaching out. You say, hey, man,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, but I just meant in terms of, we need to, like you're talking about earlier about raising the whatever. Mm-hmm. I need to have some sort of metric, which is going to be to weed people out. So some of them, any filter is going to be weeding out people you don't want to weed out and letting in people you do. So that is just one of mine, which is completely fallacious, but I use it.
Yeah, for sure. For me, man, I made a point of trying to get big name guests early on the show. I associated myself with that. I've done reality TV, so I've got the blue tick on Twitter and the free charcoal toothpaste on Instagram and stuff like that. So I had that as a little bit of social gravitas coming in. But even without that, you know, people are quite responsive if you're very efficient with the time. So don't waste someone's time. Tell them what you want, why they should let you get it from them, and explain the next step. Messaging someone and then basically leaving it in their hands to make the plans is you giving them work to do, as opposed to saying, look, this is what I want from you, this is why you should let me have it, and here's what I think we can do. Can you do this time, this date, whatever it might be? Other than that, DMs are great for reaching out to people. That's how I got you.
No, you didn't. You were tweeting at me and I was ignoring you. I don't read my DMs.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you exactly the story, and this is very interesting. There's two people who I had completely written off, who totally changed my mind about them. It was you and Joey Salads. And you were tweeting at me, and I just said, you don't even follow me. and then you followed me and you tried again, and I was not having it. And then I'm like, all right, I'm bored. I'm going to go on this himbo show and clown him for my own amusement. And you effortlessly parried everything I was throwing at you, which to me is a sign of someone who is quality. So it's rare where I'm going to go on a show to mess with people, but I thought, okay, this is such a reality show tool that I can't pass up the opportunity. And you absolutely won that exchange hands down.
Look at you now. Going to Russia with me, keeping me entertained when I'm doing long car drives so I can chat shit to you about whatever I've spent my day doing. In a fucking long distance relationship with someone that you hated.
Yes.
Yeah, man. I want to go back to the Russia thing. Have you spoken much other than, I know you brought it up on Lex's show, but have you kind of really talked much about what your plans are and why you want to do this?
I mean, not publicly per se. I think people understand the appeal, both of, because I speak Russian, but Lvov, where I was born, is from the Ukraine.
Do you speak just pure Russian?
Pure Russian, yeah. So that's the thing. And the Ukrainians are very, very, I've been hearing mixed things, but from everything I understand, people are saying I'm wrong. Maybe I am. But my understanding is when you speak Russian to Ukrainian, it's very offensive to them. And because they do not have much love for the Russian people, because for a century they were forced to speak Russian. They use, the Western alphabet as opposed to the Russian Cyrillic alphabet. I think I'm going to be able to get away with it because I'm somewhat Western. What I'm not looking forward to is every Russian man is a loudmouth, present company included, and they will feel comfortable, no matter who they are, giving you unsolicited advice about like what you're doing wrong and how you should speak better Russian and all this other stuff and your heritage. This is one of the reasons I'm so sensitive to it on Twitter. I have absolutely no sympathy or time for it. So you are going to have, I think, a week of a lot of fun watching me, not understanding what's going on, but watching me get completely flustered and enraged and taking a long time to calm down. I'm a cool cucumber, but I got to tell you, I'm anticipating this to be complete emotionally a mess. Also going to Lvov, where I'm from, and knowing that, the Germans came and just slaughtered everybody, and the Ukrainians were kind of helping them along, is my understanding, is that's not going to be fun. Seeing where my parents had to go through and all the stories I heard as a kid to see the actual places, that's not going to be fun either.
Part of me doesn't want you to be emotionally distressed, but part of me wants to really, really see you flustered. It's
going to be great TV, great video, but there's no possibility this is not going to be very intense. At the very least, it's going to be intense because I'm going to be in a country where I have a lot in common with it, and it's going to be my place. But at the same time, I'm going to be a foreigner. It's going to be a very dissonant experience.
A question I had for you. Do you feel like you belong in America, Ukraine? Are you Russian? Are you American? Are you Italian? Do you know what I mean? When you have this blend, I'm thoroughbred Northern British, so thankfully I don't have the fears of an exotic background giving me confusion. What do you think of yourself?
I never think of myself as anything to do with Ukraine at all. So I don't know. And I think this is where the rubber's going to hit the road. Because when you're there, I read at like a kindergarten level Russian. Like I only learned to read Russian when I was like in college, but it's phonetic, the alphabet, so it's kind of easy to read. They're going to be making fun of my accent, I'm sure. My grandma says I speak Russian as if I'm mentally limited. So that's going to be, yeah. She says you speak Russian like you have Down syndrome. She said that to me.
Fuck me.
Yeah. So this is going to be, it's going to be, I don't know. There's a Russian neighborhood here in New York City called Brighton Beach, right? And all the signage is in Russian and everyone's just fresh off the boat and all this other stuff. And I don't like it there. Like, I also just don't like the clothes and the food.
Give me some of the positive reasons of why you want to do this trip. Because I know that there's some sort of protection and concern and warning about some of the things that might go wrong. But what are some of the things that might go right?
Well, I think when you get older, you kind of want to learn a bit more about where you came from, right? I think any bro trip is a lot of fun. Like that's just like the best kind of those experiences. I mean, North Korea was a a hoot and a half in a sense. And I mean, I'm glad I did that. This is not going to be anything close to that. So I think it's going to answer that question, like you were saying, like how much of this is part of me, how American am I? I already know the first shot, which is going to be, and I've told you this, me going through my 30 pairs of denim and figuring out which ones to pack, for this trip.
That's going to drive me insane. And I'm going to drive you insane because I'm going to wear shite fast fashion for the entire time I'm there.
What does that even mean?
Well, just like you're going to be wearing, it's this weave with this particular colored stitching. It's a custom butter blend or whatever. And I'm going to be wearing a 25-pound pair of jeans that were made off the back of some small child.
No, my jeans are all child made. I mean, come on, I'm not wearing adult made jeans. No, but the thing is, what people might not know is denim back in the communist era was the ultimate symbol of Western decadence and also of wealth. It was a status thing. So people would bring jeans there, and it was this huge it's almost a sense of defiance. In North Korea, I think they're still illegal. It was really it's so associated with the West.
Wow.
So that's just going to kind of set up the whole thing. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
I'm excited, man. I'm excited.
I don't know how they're going to take my clothes. I mean, are they all going to be in tracksuits over there and Adidas? I mean, is that going to be the? Yeah. I imagine there's going to be. I don't know. I'm already
excited.
getting.
It's
going to
be so
flustered.
much fun.
I'm already getting flustered. Just those people. They're so.
What's crazy? I think a lot. Like, think about the fact that in a year's time from now, presuming that there's no restrictions and that we can actually do it, in a year's time, we'll have those memories of the fact that we went there. We'll be able to look back and like delve into our experience. I saw you in this place and you looked like this and you had this exchange with that man. The way that you kind of go through life and you continually imprint your experiences. It's going to be so cool. I'm going to enjoy the experience, and I'm going to enjoy reflecting on it as well.
I'm already anticipating one thing happening, which is like, obviously coming from nightlife and all this other stuff, you know how to be very charming. I had this event I was doing with a buddy of mine. And at a certain point, the person running it was so annoying that I said to my friend, either you take this over or I'm walking. So I think there are going to be certain points where I'm wondering if they're going to be within 10 seconds where it's going to be like, okay, Chris, you got to take this over.
Am I here as a fucking mediator?
I think it's going to be like Amazing Race. You ever watched that show?
No.
So Amazing Race it's I know several people who've been on it. Basically, they start in like San Francisco or London, and they literally race around the world. It takes like a month, and they circumnavigate the globe. And in every city, they have it's always two people. Every city, they have different tasks that they have to accomplish. And it's really funny because they were in Russia once, and they had the clue, and the person's like, I'll do it. And what they had to do is they had to eat a bowl full of caviar. And all the Americans were like crying because it was like so fishy and salty. And I'm like, I would have been all over this, just like, so there's going to be certain things that I think you're going to do well and certain things that I do well. And I think you probably are going to be better talking to these Russia people than I will, because it's just going to be it's going to be very juvenile, because the only time I'm surrounded by Russians is when I was a kid. So it's just going to take me back to this sense of powerlessness around horrible people.
Are you going to ask Lex for any insight?
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a very good idea. Yeah, he's going to tell me just give them love. Show them love. It's like, thanks, Lex.
Thanks,
110111011.
Yeah, it takes a short break from coding to come and binary you something. Unbelievable.
That might be not bad advice. So one of the other things that I was talking about you on Lex's show, you were just in Dubai. You were sending me these pics of you by the pool, just having a blast. And it took me a week to realize that there's a lot of people who aren't receptive to seeing their bros thrive, that they get resentful and they think it's some kind of humble brag. Coming from that nightlife culture, you must have been surrounded by that type of mentality. And how did you escape it?
Yeah, it's a very zero-sum game. Yeah. Especially remembering that we have such a tight market. Any one night of the week, there's maybe 2 to 10,000 people out, and 10 to 20,000 spaces in nightclubs. So it's a very sought after commodity, right? There's more supply than there is demand, which means that if you go to his club, you haven't come to mine, which causes a very, very sort of insular, anxiety-driven sort of world. Because when you steal a member of staff, when you build a new business, a particular new night launches, you're taking people directly out of my pocket, and it iterates every week. It's like a sports league, and every single week you're doing the same thing. And it's Monday at this night and Tuesday at this night, and it's basically the Wild West. The way that I deprogrammed that was by deprogramming my sense of self-worth from the performance of the events. This is something that I think a lot of young guys have, especially guys who attach themselves to business early on. I arrived at university. I didn't have much of a concrete sense of self. I found some success within an industry. Mine was club promo. And very quickly, my sense of self-worth became how well has the night performed. If the night had done well, I was good. If the night had done bad, I was bad.
That's very dangerous.
But man, like, what else are you supposed to attach your sense of self-worth to when you're a young guy?
I get it, but like what I'm saying is for the young people listening to this, it's, when you have something where your self-esteem is about something you have limited control, it's going to make you spiral.
Oh man, it was brutal. So here's the really nefarious thing that happened. After a little bit of time, I started to associate my level of self-worth and success not with how the nights had performed, but with how much suffering I'd gone through during the nights. So I would run an event on a Saturday night. I worked 208 Saturdays in a row without a break. So I was going on holiday for 4 days at a time and flying back to do this. And the only first Saturday that I broke was when I had a chest infection. I literally couldn't stand up. So every single Saturday for 4 years, I did the same thing. And if the night had been successful, but I'd not suffered as a part of it, if I'd found it easy, if I hadn't stayed up until 6 a.m. finishing the accounts, if there wasn't a catastrophe I needed to fix, I'd feel guilty. And I feel like it was a Puritan work ethic. So you can imagine these priests in the Middle Ages, and they're hoeing the gardens, and they got blisters on their hands, and the sun's beating down on their backs, and their work is what they're there for. It's in tribute to God, right? That's what they're trying to do.
Have you read that book?
What?
The Protestant Work Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism?
No.
Oh, you're referencing this very famous book by, I always get the authors confused, Max Weber. So he wrote a book that says the only reason capitalism works is because of the Protestant work ethic, where people regard hard work as moral in and of itself and the profit as secondary. And without that, it's a very thought-provoking book. It's 1930, it came out in English. But everyone who's a business major reads it.
I did 2 business degrees and I didn't read it. So the UK higher education is shit.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'd gone through that, and I had this conversation with a friend, and I said, "Look, man, this is how I feel. I feel like I'm really only feel like I'm worth something, or like I've done well when I've suffered along with it." And that was like obviously super, super unhealthy. And that took a lot of time to deprogram, man. And the turning point for that was going on the second reality TV program that I did. And that caused me to really reassess where I was at, and ended up with a severe left turn in terms of how I thought of myself and what I wanted from life and the kind of self-work I was doing. But up until that point, from 18 until 27, like, it's a long time. You know, I speak to young guys now. I've got friends who are in their early 20s that are so much more aligned and developed than I was at that age. And I feel like this is what everyone thinks about people that are younger than them, right? Like, you look at 14-year-olds now who basically look like they're 22. Yeah. And you think that they've got makeup on and they're doing TikTok dances and stuff. Yeah, so that was an interesting learning experience, but it was definitely one that I probably could have optimized a little bit better.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. I want to tell you about a sponsor that I use every single day, Sheath Underwear. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. Why is it called SHEATH underwear.com? Because Sheath is underwear that has 2 separate pouches to keep your man parts separated. It's great for working out, being in hot environments, and it makes your booty look awesome too. I assure you. Trust me on this one. If you're sick of boxers that are too loose, briefs that are too tight, Sheath is for you. I wear them every day. You can get in my pants. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. Here's the thing. When they brought him to the studio, I was like, what is this? I don't understand what's going on. And then I tried them on. I'm like, oh, this is fun. And I got to tell you, if you're doing a job interview or any other kind of conversation, knowing your underwear is cupping your genitals, there's something subversive I like about that. And you know how my people like subversion. Let's get back to the show. Let's talk about dealing with online hate. So one of the things people often ask me is how I deal with the haters. And I have far less hate than I should. And like someone like Dave Rubin has like 1,000 times more hate than I do, even though I'm 1,000 times more of a jackass than he is. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding things. So my sister watched your season of Love Island, and let's just say she had a very different opinion of you than I did. But when you're on a reality show like that, you are going to get a lot of hostility and feedback, and you can't avoid it. When people ask me how I deal with it, to me, what helped me is being a New Yorker. And I say, if a homeless person comes up to me and starts saying I'm dumb or I'm ugly or I'm not funny or I'm irrelevant, my only concern is I have to get away from this homeless person. It's not like, well, maybe I'm not as relevant as I think I am. That's not how the brain works. So when it happens on Twitter, it's like the exact same mental phenomenon. There's no part of me that takes seriously, even if they're right, anything that they're saying. What was your response to being on that show, and how did that affect your psyche?
No,
you got voted out by like the British public, right?
No, it was voted out on the show. So we were in there for 3 and a bit weeks, and there was only a few people that weren't coupled up.
Okay.
I wasn't interested in any of the girls that were on there, which probably contributed to not being bothered about what they had to say. Which is obviously a bad beginning on a dating show. So yeah, it was like the 2 single people left. There wasn't really much, man. I get much more now. I get much more feedback and critique from being on YouTube and doing Modern Wisdom and stuff like that. Yeah, tons more. I think that's because, for the most part, the guys on a show, you have to do something pretty catastrophically wrong to actually get hate. Girls are much more catty about girls. She looks fat in that dress. She's a slag. Whatever it might be. They're just.
But all of that was true. I saw those women.
That's perhaps true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I think the criticism thing's interesting, especially as the platform grows. I think you use it and weaponize it. You're like a black hole. Someone fires criticism at you, and then you're like, hang on, this is now content. So I bet that there's myriads of people out there who choose not to criticize you because they know that they're basically fueling your car. They're putting gas in your tank because you're going to quote tweet it and use it to further grow the thing that they're complaining about, the fact that you've grown. Whereas if you don't have that inherent sort of troll source code, if that's not necessarily the way that you're built, it's much more difficult. But for the most part, man, like, you can just ignore it. Like, these people, the people who can do, the people who can't complain. That's the easiest heuristic to use.
I don't think that's good advice, in the sense of, when people are insecure, which I'm not, when they hear things that touch their insecurities, you can't ignore it. It's hitting that emotional chord.
Okay, so here's another one. Most people that criticize you don't actually care about their opinions.
Sure.
You just have a macro fear of criticism overall. And that's just hardwired in, right? We used to be tribal societies. We couldn't drop ourselves down the status ladder. That's what that anxiety feeling is. That's what you that sort of stomach, it's in your stomach and it makes your shoulders drop and you kind of get a bit hot and flush in the face. Like, that is the sensation of you slowly slipping down the status ladder. But if you just have a tiny little bit of a mindfulness gap, and this is where spending a fair bit of time meditating and doing self-inquiry has really helped for me, I realized that the people that criticize me, I don't care about their opinion. I just don't like criticism.
Yeah, that's a great way of framing it. Yeah.
I have an aversion to criticism. It is programmed into me the same way as I have aversion to meat that's gone off and foods that are the color blue and going out in the cold and all that sort of stuff. This is the same. It's programmed into me, but it doesn't need to be. The same way as you don't need to be scared of a cold shower, because you are choosing that. You don't need to be scared of this criticism from a random human on the internet. My good friend Daniel Sloss, Netflix special comedian, Scottish guy, he has a slightly different approach. And I asked him, how do you deal with criticism And he says, by knowing that I'm fucking better than every single one of them, what do I care that some guy has smashed his cheesy little fingers into the keyboard? But it's horses for courses. You use your particular approach because of your makeup, because of the outlets that you have. And for me, the best approach I found is that I don't value the people's opinions that are criticizing me. I just had in the past overall concern about being criticized.
Let's talk about that work ethic thing, because I think that's something people struggle with. It just in the last year, I clicked that we have complete contradictory advice when it comes to the gym, right? At the same time, you want to go in there, you want to give 100% every time, right? You don't want to leave anything in the tank. And then there's the opposite, which is if you go too hard, you're going to train and injure yourself. And you have almost no capacity when you're there, or most people don't, to when your body's slowing down to be like, is this pushing toward an injury, or is this my brain saying resource scarcity, I don't want you to work harder? So how did you find that? Did you conquer that idea of this Protestant work ethic?
In the gym or in general life?
Yeah, in general.
Yeah, that involved putting myself first and understanding genuinely what self-care is. Again, classic type A go-getter, party boy, alpha male, wannabe around town, big dick on campus guy. You go through your 20s, you are your accomplishments, you are your status, you are how many people notice you, how many people know you, your follower count, all the rest of it. But again, like, questioning, do I actually care about what that 18-year-old girl thinks of my club night? There would be a time where we'd receive a bad review, or someone would be thrown out for being too drunk, and we'd go, oh, this is fucking shit. And I'd be like, oh, maybe it is. Maybe that's the little snowball at the top of the hill that causes the avalanche and the whole business is going to collapse. But that's because the sample size you're working with is about this big, because you're 21 and you don't know anything.
Yeah, right.
And over time, what felt like huge tidal waves actually turn out to be just little swells. And that sense of perspective, I think you can hurry it along by not attaching yourself to things, by trying to remain as rational as possible, by creating the mindfulness gap between the thoughts that you have in your head and actually thinking that they are you, or that you're somehow the same as them or attached to them. But more than that, it's just time. And this is why you hear people like yourself, and I know Rogan talks about this an awful lot, where he says that it takes an awful lot of time. He looks back at himself at 35 and thinks like, what an idiot. And you go, well, 35, you've been around for quite a while, but 35 to a 50-year-old does feel like an idiot, because you're just constantly accruing wisdom. And as long as you're iterating and reflecting on that, if you're not embarrassed by the person that you were 3 years ago, I don't think that you're necessarily making sufficient progress.
I'm not embarrassed at all. I was a badass 3 years ago.
Were you? Have you gone downhill?
Yeah. No, I've gone uphill.
Okay, but the person that you are now, do they wipe the floor with the skills and capacities and the...
Oh, sure, but he's not embarrassing.
Okay, you understand my point. Maybe embarrassing was the wrong word, but...
Okay. I don't know I understand your point then. I don't follow then.
Okay. The person that you were a little while ago should pale in comparison to the person that you are now.
Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, 100%.
And I wonder when that stops.
I think it's different for males.
Yeah, sadly.
And yeah, is 60 the new 40? I think it could be. Man.
Yeah, if you train, you can keep your fluid intellect going at the age of a 30-year-old basically for the rest of your life. If you stop training, then you'll get that decrease. But yeah, it's an interesting one, man. Like I think that young guys are struggling for it's challenging at the moment. You know this. A lot of your followers are guys who ask you for advice. I know that you told me. And trying to find a direction, like what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to attach yourself to accomplishments? It's so complex now. Is it supposed to be the family guy, build a family at the age of 21, marry the high school sweetheart, American dream? That thing's gone. You've got to work now. You're going to live until you're probably 80 or 85 or maybe 90. If you're being born now, you're probably going to live until you're 90. Every generation that's born lives 8 years longer than the one before, which means that every 3 generations lives for another generation. Yeah. I think the concept of having a job for life is gone. You're going to go through multiple partners. It's all of the rules that we had up until now, I think, go out of the window. And when you have this normlessness in society, people look for direction. That was the advent of people like Jordan Peterson, right? a little while ago. He was trying to give people some sort of structure. He was trying to give people some sort of direction.
I can't believe I've never asked you this. This is something I love. When you have friends who are accomplished, they have all sorts of secret knowledge in the back of their head, and you're like, oh yeah, I could ask them this, and this is really useful information. If someone is throwing a party in their house, what advice would you give them to make it a success?
First thing, have a haze machine.
What? What's the haze machine?
So very, very light smoke.
Okay, in their house?
Yeah. So just like a very, very light one. It'll be what you'd think of at at a wedding. It would just provide a little bit of atmosphere. The reason is you can make a normal room look cool with some slight moving lights. You know, like one of those shit disco balls off Amazon.
Yeah.
The difference between that in a room that's got no smoke and that in a room that's got a tiny little bit of haze is 4-year-old school disco and, this isn't actually that shit.
Okay.
Telling you, haze machine, good music, good sound system, more girls than guys. Like, even if everyone's supposed to be there in a couple, it's just weird when you go in and it's a cockfest. Like, here's an interesting insight. Events is the only industry in which the way that you judge the quality of the product or service that you're receiving is based on the other consumers of that product or service. So I say to you, hey man, how was your night last night? And you go, dude, it was awesome. There was so many girls in there and such are hooked up with this guy and so this thing happened. I go, no. I didn't ask who else was there. I said, yeah. How was the event? No, but it was really busy. No, you're doing it again. Like, what happened what was the event itself? And this is the interesting thing for club promoters, and this is what causes that ambient anxiety in the zero-sum game stuff, is that it's got nothing to do really with the music and the drinks prices and the quality of the lighting system and whether you gave out inflatables halfway through and whether the dancers can dance or whether they're shit, because no one cares. Everyone just cares about the other people that are there. So actually, probably the number one thing that you need to do at a party is invite other interesting people. Like fit, good-looking, interesting people. Because if they're there, you can throw the crappiest party with the worst music and rubbish drinks and awful food, and it's still fine.
What's the trick to getting women to come to your event, but not men, but not too many men?
You'll see every event now, pretty much, at least in the UK, is geared directly at girls. So lots of pastel shades, very good-looking Instagram. The photographer will be unbelievably good. They'll know that they'll get an amazing new Instagram photo if they go. Flower walls and...
What's a flower wall?
Like a wall of flowers, and you get a photo in front of it and it looks cool on your Instagram.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Yeah, I know. But basically, you just gear everything towards getting the girls there. In America, there's a lot more of an aggressive culture of discounting entry for girls or doing free entry for girls. That doesn't really happen so much, not in my industry. But just having... The way that we fill nightclubs is we have guys who know people that want to go to events, and they just directly network, which is why it's so militant, because they can pick apart another event's networks. They can say, right, I'm going to take every single group of girls that I know that go to their events because they're on their Instagram and they're in the Facebook album that's uploaded afterward. But you just get people to ask them, she's fit, let's see where she's going tonight. She's fit, let's see where she's going tonight. And just once you've picked up enough of those, the rest of them come.
Huh. What's your advice for people when they're interviewing... because you've talked to like some of the great minds of our generation. Like, are you nervous when you're talking to them? I mean, people who've inspired you. So like, how do you kind of talk to them without spurging out?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I've had it a few times, but recently now, this is the power seems like it's been flipped more towards me. So I think Robert Greene was maybe sort of episode 70 for me, which was perhaps just after the first year, and I was pretty sort of nervous speaking to him because I'm like, who the fuck am I? That's Robert Greene. Do you know what I mean? Like 5 times New York Times best-selling author. But the more that you expand your domain of competence by doing hard things well and feeling pride in what it is that you do and looking at it objectively and not working on your suffering, actually working on the output and saying, look, did I feel good after I did that? I'm 270 episodes into my show now. Like, if you do anything 270 times, if I wanked 270 times, I'd get pretty good at it. So by doing it, the time and attention means that I'm good. There's a concept from pickup artistry called "you are the prize." And it's the frame that you're supposed to enter most interactions with. That you're so fortunate to be speaking to me. And it just gives you that sense that, yeah, I'm in control here. This is my frame, not your frame. And very much, if you can't feel at home on your own show, where can you feel at home? Bring somebody on that I really respect, that I really admire, that I've wanted to talk to for a long time. How amazing is it that I've got them in essentially my living room and I get to talk to them? How lucky is it that they're going to be exposed to a couple of 100,000 new people that maybe don't know their work? And how good is it for them that I know that I'm going to ask better questions than anyone that they've ever spoken to before? And that's the one sort of secret weapon I think that curiosity gives everyone in the 21st century is if you're a curious individual and you learn how to hone it, you can ask questions that will make people instantly like you because you will lead them to a realization that they've never had before.
When people are deep inside an industry or a space, they are often oblivious to what it's like outside of it. So I'm going to give you some data that maybe you'll find surprising, maybe you don't, that I found extremely surprising. There were two big names that I was talking to. They had like upwards of 500,000 people on Twitter, just prominent figures in politics. And I invited them both on my show, and they could not wrap their heads. And it wasn't because my audience is too small. They could not wrap their heads around an hour interview with video. They're like, that's too much. And I'm like, this is basically an invitation. I didn't say this to them because it's like there's no mind there. If I have to explain this to you, it's not going to you're not going to believe me. But this is an hour for a huge population to fall in love with you, to feel invested in you. You complain about our culture being too soundbitey. You could expound your ideas at length. Like, this is your floor. This is a big hand job. And they just were completely, and this is where I think so much of our culture is going. People are sick of things being edited down and force fed. They want the depth. They want the nuance. It's, it's such a, it's, like how people have started now at the gym where they're traveling, they'll listen to the book on tape and stuff better that way. This is like, okay, I'm also better myself. I'm hearing a conversation between two great minds. And there's a huge percentage of people in media who have no idea of this space. Does that surprise you to learn?
Yeah, massively.
Yeah.
I've got this talk coming up in a couple of months' time and I've been preparing for it. And there's this quote, I can't remember who it was, some famous talker. And they said, how long do you spend preparing for a speech? He says, well, if I've got 10 minutes, it'll take about a month and a half. If I've got half an hour, it'll take a couple of weeks. And if I can talk for as long as I want, then I don't need to prepare at all.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And that seems totally converse. I don't know. Like, what are you doing? A soundbite to me should be a distillation of all of the stuff that you've spent time talking about. Like, think about your tweets. How many of your tweets have come out from you sitting and thinking about something and then going, that's it. And then you synthesize it down into 280 characters or less. And you're like, fuck yeah, but it's this big thing that's explained in this small thing. And that's what makes it beautiful. But if you can't do the big thing, then it's like all show and no grow.
It was so shocking to me. And
That's
I'm like,
bizarre.
okay, it was so crazy. Yeah. And anyway, so but it just also made me realize how this space, which you know better than I do even, how much I take for granted, which I thought, how people say Twitter's not real life. I understand that Twitter's one site, but I would think podcasting, where there's so much information about it's constantly in the zeitgeist and just people have no idea what it is. Yeah,
that's crazy.
And
I can't believe it.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the names after because I like messing with the audience and having inside references with the guest because it's a lot of fun that way, so that they don't forget their place. Chris, we are running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this episode?
Getting excited about Russia. I can't wait to go. I'm really, really excited.
You are welcome.